Well, if you burn lots of fires, bonfires outside, or maybe you have a fireplace, wood burning stove like I do, and you get all of this ash, you've probably searched online if you can use that ash in some sort of way that is beneficial to your plants. And the answer is yes, but with caveats. So in this video, I'm gonna go through all of the potential benefits and potential harm that using ash can provide for our plants, both outside in the garden as well as inside in our house plants. And then I'm actually gonna show you guys how to use it both inside and outside. So the first thing that we need to really be aware of is that we're talking about wood ash, not from any sort of treated lumber or trash or what have you. We're talking about strictly wood. Now, when it comes to wood, of course, there's hardwoods like oaks and maples, and then there's softwoods like pines and firs. Each sort of wood is going to have different potential nutrients, different quantities of nutrients. I'm not necessarily going to go into all of those differences in this video. This is going to be more of a general outline on using ash in the garden. So here I have my big metal barrel of my ash, and there's really a few ways that ash can change our soil. And first and foremost, as a soil conditioner, it's nice and light, and when we use it in our garden, it will help to create some a little bit better aeration in our garden, especially if you have super dense clay soil. Adding ash can absolutely add a levity to your soil, and that's going to be beneficial for a lot of plants. So definitely using it can help the texture and the conditionings of our soil. Now, most of us are going to be primarily interested in how we can use it as a fertilizer. Going back to the hardwood versus softwood, hardwoods typically are going to have a richer nutrient content compared to the softwoods, but both hardwoods and softwoods, the main elements that they can provide, first and foremost, is going to be calcium, then potassium, phosphorus, as well as some trace amounts of things like iron, aluminum, manganese, zinc, boron, magnesium, and sulfur. So there are a lot of potential nutrients that can be added when using our fertilizer, or when using ash as a fertilizer. Now we get to the part that is the biggest caveat. All right, so why don't I just start dumping all of my ash into my flower beds? Well, the first nutrient that you heard me say, calcium. Generally, when we're adding things that have calcium, such as lime, that is what's going to change the pH of our garden beds. So by adding ash into our garden beds, we can over time influence the pH in our gardens, and it makes our garden beds more alkali. It increases the pH. And the reason is because wood ash contains something called carbonates. Those carbonates actually act to neutralize ash in the garden. Neutralize acids in the garden. Now, of course, the degree to which the ash is going to change the pH is dependent on whether you're burning young wood versus old wood, hardwood, softwood, also the speed at which your wood burns. All of these things influence the ability of the ash to neutralize the acids in the garden soils. So it is a little bit more complex. It's not super straightforward. And for those reasons, we generally want to stay away from using ash around plants that really like that acidic soil. You like our things from the Ericaceae family. That would be rhododendrons, azaleas, blueberries, cranberries, heaths, and heathers. We don't want to use ash in those areas. Also potatoes, they don't like having a high pH. There's a few different fruiting plants that don't like high pHs, pin oaks, certain maples. So you want to do a little bit more research before you just start going and dumping our ash on our flower beds. But because it is rich in calcium and potassium, many of us are aware that potassium is really important for flower formation. And assuming you're not worried about increasing your pH too much, I definitely use this on my shrubs, hydrangeas, my flowering herbaceous perennials, tomatoes, brassicas, that's like cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, as well as grasses, many conifers as well, like ash as a fertilizer. Yes, you can even use it on the lawn, and it is a great free lawn fertilizer. Now, a couple things you also want to consider before going and using ash is that some woods may contain heavy metals, and if you burn these woods that have the heavy metals and then you add too much ash to your vegetable gardens, those plants can uptake that heavy metals. But assuming that you're adding the ash in the appropriate levels, it really shouldn't be a big deal. But it is something that some gardeners have brought their attention to. Another thing you should note is that the ash as a fertilizer doesn't contain any nitrogen. So it's an incomplete fertilizer. We remember fertilizers to be complete NPK. They need nitrogen, they need the phosphorus, and they need that potassium. Have phosphorus, potassium, no nitrogen. So you might be thinking, all right, I'll mix some ash with some nitrogen fertilizer. Don't do that. Don't do that. That can actually create a reaction, and we don't want to do. We want to just add the ash on its own. So clearly there's things to think about before just going and adding ash into our garden beds as a fertilizer, but the fact that it's free, and if it is free for you, it's probably abundantly free, meaning you have a lot of it like I do. So it is worth putting in a little bit of extra effort to determine whether or not you should use it in your garden or where you should be using it in your garden. All right, so now that we know what it can provide, whether or not, some of the caveats, let's talk about how to actually use it. All right, so obviously the first thing we need to make sure is that our embers are all cooled completely. It can be beneficial to sieve out any large chunks, of course, and you're gonna wanna use eye protection, maybe a mouth protection as well. You don't want to be breathing in. The ash flies everywhere. Now, the first way you can use it in a compost pile. For every 6 inches or so of our compost, we can use like 1 or 2 cups of our ash and mix it in. That's going to be a nice addition of nutrients without making it too alkali. Now the next way is in our flower beds. So generally it is thought that for every 1,000 square feet of flower bed space, you can use 15 to 20 pounds of the ash. Now this is a typical, this is like a 6-gallon wood ash pail. And this is about, when totally full, about 20 pounds. So I can use this entire thing on a bed that's around 1,000 square feet. Now this bed right here, this is about 30 feet long by 30 feet wide, so 900 square feet. So I can use an entire pail in this area. And what I do is I'm just gonna scoop it out. I'm gonna just gently, lightly place it all over the flower bed. And then what I would like to do is just gently rake it in. Now the best time that we want to do this is during the winter time when our plants are dormant. And because it doesn't contain any nitrogen, you can use this fertilizer in the winter and you're not going to be sort of, promoting any, quick growth. And from the winter until the spring season, any sort of salts that could be laden in this ash will definitely get washed out by the time spring arrives. You don't have to worry about scorching your plants. Now, when we're talking about fertilizing our lawns, we want to do a little bit less, about 10 pounds for every 1,000 square feet. And we're going to just do either of these applications. We're just going to do once a year. On the lawn, maybe you could do it once every 6 months. That would be fine. You could do like late winter and early autumn, perhaps. That would be a good kind of timeline. Generally speaking, less is going to be more. We don't want to overdo it with the ash. Using ash in a potted plant without being too complicated. My wife says I get a little too complicated in my videos sometimes. So we're going to have to do a little bit of math. So this is an 18-inch pot, 18 inch by 18 inch. That's 2.25 square feet. Doing some calculations, I've already done it. 2.25 square feet requires about 0.04 pounds or 0.64 ounces of ash to be safe. So I have a little scale over here. Let's just take a look, see how much 0.64 ounces is. All right, so put our mug on, then we tear it. All right, so now we have 0.6 ounces. Now, of course, I would never do this as I'm adding it to my plants in my houseplant home, but this is just to give you a visual reference of what sort of an acceptable amount is so that you can just, we're just gonna eyeball this when we're doing it ourselves. Let's be realistic. So then you can just sprinkle it on. So as you can see, it is a nice even layer, not thick, just a nice thin layer on top, and that's perfect. And with that, now you know how to use ash in the garden. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like. If you do have any other questions or comments, definitely leave them in the comment section below. We have a wonderful community of gardeners where lots of wonderful comments that give great suggestions. I learn a lot from you guys all the time. Don't forget, subscribe to our channel. We have lots of, over 1,000 videos all about plants and Mother Nature. Anyways, thanks for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I'll catch you later. Ciao.